I'm Robbie Knock, and I'm the Director of Entrepreneurship and Professional Practice at Art Center. Thank you for joining us today on Zoom. I know many of you are coming from all over the world, and we are really glad to have you here for a session on patterns of creative leadership with Cristo and Jose Caballer.
Hello.
So, during our time today, our goal is to help you understand how to apply creative leadership to your practice, ways to build resilient teams, and why community is essential to every business, particularly in the way it underpins relationships with clients, customers, and collaborators. Before we get started, I'd like to offer a bit of context and introduction. As many of you know, this webinar is part of Bold at Art Center, our platform for creative entrepreneurs. Thank you to Yvette Roman and Robert Nashak for their ongoing support. Broadly, Bold's mission is threefold. It is to educate artists and designers with business and entrepreneurship skills needed to succeed professionally, to enable artists and designers to articulate and convey the unique value they bring to businesses and clients. And more than anything else, Bold is here to help you start something new, to create something that doesn't yet exist. It is through this mission that I've had the incredible fortune of working with Jose and Chris, who I met back in 2014 at Art Center. I can clearly remember their immediate enthusiasm during our first conversation over lunch. We shared a similar vision that artists and designers were uniquely capable of transforming the world for the better, and that to do so required further access to business and entrepreneurship education. So both Chris and Jose are alumni from the graphic design program at Art Center, and they are also former faculty. And there have been many patterns in their careers that overlap. I won't go into the full details of their background, and we will definitely touch on some of that over the course of the conversation. But importantly, Jose started his career as a web designer at Razorfish, and then after getting a whole bunch of experience, launched his own agency called The Group. And similarly, Chris worked as a designer and freelancer before starting his own brand design consultancy, Blind. With those individual efforts, they were incredibly successful in their own right. And in 2012, they began to collaborate and build an online platform and community called The School, along with a methodology called Core. Since then, they have established a global community of artists and designers with programming dedicated to business and professional success. Their work and their efforts truly align with the work that we do at Art Center in this space. What is amazing about Jose and Chris is that they are textbook examples of creative entrepreneurs whilst simultaneously teaching others to do the same thing. The compound network effects of their work is remarkable, and it really is changing the way that artists and designers exist in the world. So I could go on and on about all of that, but I'd really like to hear it directly from Jose and Chris. And to begin, firstly, thank you for being here. And to get us started, I'd love to have you go back in time to when you first were talking and to think about how much of a vision for the future you had back then. What was your focus and how has that evolved through the course of your work over the last, 8 years?
Jose, good to see you. Do you want to take this one first or should I?
How about you take it first, Chris?
Okay, I'll tell this story. So Jose and I served on the AIGA board in Los Angeles, and I was going through a transitionary moment with my company, Blind. Mostly we did motion graphics. I was starting to dabble in web. I'm a pretty late bloomer when it comes to web design. I was struggling with projects. And I asked Jose, can you help me out with this? Can you help me figure out the web thing? He says, look, I'll just do it for you. I'll show it to you. And this act of generosity was what really began this crazy adventure that he and I went on. One thing led to another. We started to work together. We both had a similar idea about creating an education company. And he's like, let's do it together. Let's form this thing. Let's make the school happen. And that's really the genesis of how we started to work together. Speaking for myself, my vision for the future in 2014 wasn't one. I would freely admit this. It was more like I'm experimenting. Jose's pulling me very reluctantly into this web space, creating content for YouTube. And as I've told this story before, it's not something I wanted to do. I had a lot to risk, a lot to lose, professional reputation. My big mouth might say something to alienate clients. It was just not a good idea. But again, in his kind of friendship and mentoring of me, he said, look, all you have to do is stand there and say nothing. I'll do all the talking. And of course, if you know Jose, he could do all the talking all day long. So then I stood there kind of super rigid. I remember after recording, I must have said like 25 words. And the next day, my jaw hurt real bad. And I couldn't figure out why. It was because of all the tension that was building up in my mouth as a classic introvert, as an INTJ. And being on camera, looking at the one-eyed beast, this piece of glass, it was very uncomfortable for me. So back then, the vision was, let's take this day at a time, moment to moment, and see where this goes. Jose, you want to tell your side of the story?
Yeah, to answer your question, Robbie, and first of all, thank you for putting this together. The answer is yes. I had a very clear vision that this would be the day or a case. Art Center plays a really important role in the birth of the future. I prototyped what was the school as Evil Businessman at Art Center under the auspice of your boss. An amazing, Christine was so supportive. Everyone at Art Center was so supportive. And we did this big hoorah rah, me wearing like a little mic, you know, Tony Robbins style. And it was really a clear picture. But the birth of it was really from Daniel Pink's book, A Whole New Mind. And the real quote in it, the last few decades have belonged to a certain kind of person with a certain kind of mind. Computer programmers who can code, lawyers who could do contracts, MBAs who can crunch numbers. But the keys to the kingdom are changing hands. That quote is amazing. The future belongs to a very different kind of person. It belongs to Chris Do. It belongs to everyone on this call.
Jose, people are saying your volume is a little bit on the low side.
How about this?
Oh, there. That's much
Is
better.
better?
Yes, this is
Yeah,
better.
so I'm going to Larry King it. And these aren't suspenders,
Yes.
by the way. This is actually my wallet. These people, artists, inventors, designers, storytellers, caregivers, consolers, big picture thinkers, they will now reap society's richest rewards and share its greatest joys. And if you don't know this, Daniel Pink signed his book, A Whole New Mind, at Art Center during a talk hosted by Art Center. And he said, I hope there's another business in this book. Because I had told him that his first book was the prototype for my first business, the group. So Art Center is really, thank you. Without you, this would not be. Without our relationship to Art Center and the support of us as alumni, the future wouldn't be here today. So I knew that this would be the case. And I knew when Chris and I started and when I left the school and it became the future, I knew that Chris would really build an amazing community and an amazing movement. I had a lot of confidence, and I'm very proud of my friend and collaborator. And I have more to share about that later, but I'm very proud of what's been created. So that's the answer to your question, Robbie. Yes.
So I think that something that is you both touched on and is not always really brought to the forefront in the world of business and entrepreneurship is this idea of kindness, generosity, and sharing. How have those traits and those practices led to direct business success for you guys?
Why don't you take this one first, Jose?
How has community led us?
How has this sort of, there's oftentimes people think about the world of startups and entrepreneurship and that whole space as the sort of Shark Tank cutthroat, take all you can and get out at an acquisition. There's a sort of a unfortunate kind of aggressive environment that sometimes comes out. And you have always done the opposite of that. You've really listened to your customers. You've shared all sorts of content and tools for free. How have some of those practices really affected your success?
That's very got it. That's very clear. I think the hand is always hidden in business. That is what the world portrays. That business is has to be like that. But behind the scenes, there's a lot of connection occurring and a lot of power being exchanged, not from force, but really from connection, especially at the highest levels. The masculine imperative in which the 20th century was created, of like what we see on Shark Tank, what we see in the venture capital world, is a model that is not going to last. It's kind of slowly going away. We're in the last, I call it the last stand of the angry white man, and it's our president. And if you look at it from a standpoint of who and what the values are of what's coming up next, the people on this call, my hope and my secret intention has always been, my secret agenda was that if we empower creatives who are far more empathetic, who are far more connected. I'm going to reveal something about Christo that it's going to pierce his persona of boom, boom, boom. He's a sweetheart. He's super gentle and kind and loving.
Don't tell that rumor,
Such a great dad. Don't spread that rumor.
Don't spread that rumor.
He's very loving and very kind, and I learned a lot from him as a master, master to master. So the truth is that if you have something to share, if you have something to give, if you want to build something great, you're not going to build it with force. You're going to build it through love. You're going to build it through sharing and knowing, taking your gifts, the secrets that you have learned, and really passing them forward. They call it pay it forward for a reason. And the last thing I'll say is I am really excited about the rise of young, people of color and women around the world as leaders who are taking the mantle of business away from boomers and from the last generation. And no offense to that generation, you were just basically, taught a system that will not move into the future.
So
I
Chris,
took it a little political there, yeah.
Yes, you did.
and that's fine. And Chris, I see this all the time in your work on social media and in the community that surrounds the future. You're always offering, you're always putting together decks and toolkits and content in lots of different shapes and forms and giving it away, sending it out there, putting it online, and giving it to anybody that can get their hands on it. And how have you learned to do that? How is that approach, aside from Jose's sort of, background wisdom, how has that played out for you and your work over the last 8 years?
I do want to say something, and that I would like to take all the credit for some of the things that I'm doing, and that's not true at all. What you're saying requires a certain amount of courage, and I had a great backup plan, which was Blind. And Blind in 2014 was a vibrant, viable business doing between $4 to $5 million of business every single year. So I had the luxury, and there's this privilege that I have. I want to acknowledge that I could dabble in education while not worrying about where I'm going to pay my mortgage. And that was really critical. So it was a safe space to play. At the same time, there were these two worlds that were colliding for me, and I needed to bring them together. There was the world of commerce and entrepreneurship, working with clients. And that world was really great in that it paid me, but it didn't fulfill my soul, the creative urge to share and make an impact that's going to last beyond myself. And the other world was in education, which I was teaching at that time, coming up on 15 years at Art Center, at Otis, and lecturing at the different Cal State schools, which was really nourishing for that other part of me. But as we all know, they don't pay teachers very much money. And it's for the love of doing it and working with students that really lit me up. And that's what I wanted to do. So I didn't know it at that time, but the story that sometimes doesn't get told is my wife, this is before Jose and I got together, my wife would come to Art Center with me. She's also Art Center alumni, and she would come to class and sit, and I would eagerly wait for her to get in the car and we would drive home from Pasadena to the Pacific Palisades. And I'm like, so what do you think? And she goes, I can really see now why you're so excited to teach and why you give so much of yourself. Well, I want to ask you this question. Do you see yourself doing this over and over and over again? Is there a way to scale this up to impact the lives of more than 8 to 12 people? Because Art Center is famous for very small, low student to teacher ratios, right? Very low. And it's very intimate. And I didn't have the answer. I was just driving home like, God, couldn't we just leave it on a high note and say like, this was great? And I think the universe, when you look for something, it responds, the law of attraction. And a couple of months later, Jose and I are having this conversation. A couple of months after that, we're starting this thing. And I do want to put this idea out there. A lot of people think of giving as a transactional thing, that they want to see reciprocity happen like within the minute. So they post content deliberately designed to promote their services and products, and it's very transparent. People know what the agenda is. I could see right through it. And it's actually very difficult. So when I was dabbling in social media as blind, I didn't know what to post. I was just sharing projects. Hey, cool, check this out. Look at this creative way we solved this problem. And if you've seen one press release, you've seen them all. And I admit it, we were part of that press release machine. But when I started to post as myself, as a human being trying to connect to other human beings to share what it is that I have, the response is very different. There's a conversation, and this is the really important part. So when you're advertising to people, they tune out. Advertising actually pushes people away because it's very interrupted by nature. It's saying, I'm important, focus on me, versus permission marketing or content marketing, which is, I'm going to give you something. Here's a gift for you today. I hope you find this to be valuable. I hope that it gives you an answer to a problem that you didn't know you have, and I hope that your life is richer for it. And if we can do that, then all of a sudden people start to show up, and they ask, what's next? And then they get through this process of knowing you, liking you, and then potentially, if you do your job really well, they start to trust you. And that's a really important thing that's going on here. And I think a lot of creatives have this scarcity mindset that if I give my thing away to somebody, they're thinking zero-sum game, that I lose something while they gain something. It doesn't really work like that. And I have many examples I can share with you, but I have creatives, artists I invite onto the show, and I say, hey, I love your illustration. I love your design. Can you share that? And they say to me, like behind closed doors, I won't tell you who it is, Chris, if I share this, I'm going to have 1,000 clones of myself. I can compete against them. So I'll show you some things, but I think it's good to build up grit. They need to learn how to do this themselves. And so they wind up becoming the best kept secret. My philosophy, and if you look at chefs, the way chefs work, chefs share everything. It used to be like a guarded secret, like, it's like, I got 3 secret ingredients, the Colonel's secret recipe, 11 herbs and spices, whatever he says. But chefs have started to realize, any capable chef can figure out what it is that you do. There's no more secrets. That the most renowned chefs in the world, whoever they are there because they've written cookbooks, they've gone on shows, they show you exactly how to cook the perfect steak or make the perfect pasta, whatever it is. And then they build an empire, a multi-billion dollar empire by sharing just this spirit of generosity, this act of just giving. I think that's where the real power is in building community.
I completely agree. And I think that there's a balance, right? There is this, especially as somebody that people are looking to as a guide to how they might work or how they might make a set of decisions professionally related to their career. There's a double edge to that by giving everything away, you're creating this incredible network and this incredible kind of community around you. But there's also at times a need to not do that, a need to think about price points and think about how the sort of package of what you're offering is turned into a product or something that somebody that can purchase to provide revenue and that support for your company. So how have you balanced that? And Jose, maybe this is a second question for Chris, and then you can jump in after that, because I know you have a good perspective on it as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so are you asking me
Go ahead,
first,
Chris.
Robbie? Or
Yeah,
Jose? Okay, so for me
you.
first. Yeah. So, yes, I know what people are thinking. Yeah, you just give this stuff away, and then what happens? Like, my clients are on Instagram, my clients are on Twitter. How do I get clients? So, we're still getting back to this transactional way of thinking. And I want to share one really big insight that Jose and I came upon early in the day. So when we made content, I don't want to speak for him. It felt like we were making content because we had this wonderful product to share and sell to people. It was called Core, and a lot of people have used it. And personally speaking, my life has transformed because of it. But we made content, and the content always pointed to something, and there was a relationship there. And we noticed that, well, yeah, we did sell things, but we didn't really grow an audience that quickly. Then we started to experiment with Jose's permission. I'm like, you know what? Let me just try to make something that's unrelated to anything that we're doing. And this episode that we created on brand identity design started to take off. Back in the early days, we would get 50 to 100 views per day. And if we got 200, I was ecstatic. I would like wake up the next morning and tell Jose, we got 200 views today. And this thing started to take off, 400 views. And he was like, spoken like a true Asian dude. You're like looking at the stats like an animal. And that's what I was doing. So what happened is, this is the principle, just to give without strings attached, without expectations, people will show up and give back to you. And I want to tell you what's happened. The channel has grown, sales have spiked, and I'm going to pull up a stat here, okay? I have a little stat here. I want to show you the progression of what happened when we made this one super monumental, fundamental shift in our business. And I'm going to turn over my slide here so you guys can see this, okay? So this is year 2014 to 2017. In 2014, we made a grand whopping total annual revenue. Now, we didn't start at the beginning of the year, of $15,000. That's not enough to pay an intern. And this was what Jose and I were surviving on if this were a company. So basically, you could eat the bread or the meat, but you can't eat both. So in 2015, we do 42,000. So it's getting somewhere. Jose and I are looking at each other like, this might be a business. We don't know yet, but this might be something. And then you see the jump in 2016. This is when things start to take off, and we started to change the way we create content, how we build community. And you can see from year to year, it's a 300% growth. So this is that hockey stick that people talk about when it flatlines and it starts to spike. Look at where it's going here. 2017, 536,000 making educational products. This is not something to sneeze at anymore. And then look at what happens in 2018, almost $1.8 million. So we broke into the 7-figure club that everybody always talks about. 7 figures just by teaching and sharing and giving. So 2018, sadly, we fell a little short of our expectations. We only did $3.1 million. And so if you look at the trajectory of how we're growing and the way we're scaling, this company in a very short amount of time, relatively speaking, has grown faster and it will go farther than Blind has ever gone. It has the chance to break $10 million, which in my best day at running Blind, we didn't come close to that. So that's about playing a different kind of game.
Yeah. If I can, I'll show the illustration of what Chris is saying in terms of how do you do it tangibly. I'll ask the question and you can answer it in the chat. How many of you here today out of the 741 people own and have purchased Core? Just say yes. And then the next question is, there's 57 answers already. 74, that's 10%.
It's streaming in.
And then how many of you have thought about purchasing but have been holding off? Like just say yes, I haven't yet, or not yet. Say not yet. The word's not yet. Great, that's about 50 of you. What's stopping you from doing the jump, right? From taking the leap of doing that. So really ultimately the proof is in those who have done it and have gotten value of it. How many of you have increased your revenue from using Core or from any products from the future? Like how many of you make a better living now as people in the material realm? Not spiritually, not like you're happier, leave that for Jose. I'm sorry, that's me. But like how many of you are making a better living? So then if those people that are proof that you will make a better living aren't enough to convince the people that haven't made the leap yet, then it's up to you guys. You know, it's a choice. It's never about telling people or forcing people. It's about enrolling them into the reality of what is by proving it. And that takes time. It took, you know, before Chris and I worked together, I had been building my online audience. I had been preaching the same thing over and over again, like John the Baptist to whoever listened. And it was 5 people, you know, 6 people, but then that really accelerates and jumps. You have to have faith. You have to believe that whatever it is, it's worthy of being shared.
Well, and I guess that leads to a question about how you put the parameters around the product, right? So back to the notion of sharing and pushing out content in a free way with a large community. How did you actually define what it was that was the purchasable product, the piece of your, you know, your business that people actually could push a button and transact to be able to learn from and own on their own?
Jose, why don't you tell the story about the Tim Ferriss book and how that led to the original product that then evolved into Core?
Yeah, so I read the 4-Hour Work Week in 2007, and I was tired of running an agency, and I didn't see myself doing that in my 60s. And let me know if people how the volume is. I'm trying to figure out this mic. I'm trying to be like Chris, but apparently it's not as good. The real goal was freedom. It was really, how do you set something up that it doesn't require you to be working for your hours? And I believed that you could do it. I believed what he said in the book. And I started experimenting with it with the support of my friends. I got to give kudos to other Art Center alum who have done the same thing, who created online businesses to get out of the consulting or out of the service business as an agency. Dario Antonioni was one of my friends and mentors who really helped me get through that period. And I was still doing consulting, obviously, to pay the bills, but I really just did it and believed in it. And Chris was a little like, skeptical about the whole thing. But when it started making money at a certain point, after very many iterations, because there was multiple versions of the Matrix, it wasn't like one. Then really Chris was like, whoa, this can make money. Move over, I'm taking over, let's do this thing. And then that's really a good thing to understand, that it takes time. But really the concept of creating products and creating ideas and monetizing them online, you know, it's how the economy is now functioning for the most part, whether it's e-commerce or whether it's, you know, information or knowledge. It's really powerful, and people need to understand that this has been written about since the late 90s. You know, The Long Tail is a seminal book that illustrates the reason why this business works. If you want to understand why the future works as a business, read The Long Tail. Does that help? Is that a
well, I want to push you even further, just in the specifics of really what is free and what is paid, and how have you managed that? Because I think that applies to so many different business contexts and is relevant for most in the audience.
I wasn't really, you know, Chris has put out a lot of free content and has made the YouTube channel super powerful. And I wasn't as like inclined for that. I wanted to make most of it like subscription based and like, you know, behind a paywall. But also Chris comes from motion graphics, and it's very easy for him to do. So whether you use subscription or whether you use the freemium model, and there's a book called Free that talks about the freemium model. They're two sides of a coin. It's above and below. Like what's free is really the trust foundation. You know, we wouldn't have 749 people here because without that, it's a way that most companies, if you're a corporate entity or if you are starting an online education business or if you're doing any type of business online, you have to understand that, you know, people have a lot of access to free out there, and that you have to give a lot. So the ratio, you want me to tell you the ratio? I don't know the numbers for that, but Chris could probably share like how much effort goes into what's the budgeting for producing all that free content on YouTube, and how much of it corresponds to sales.
Happy to. So let's talk about a couple of things, free versus paid. This is a debate that I have internally within my own head and with my team all the time. Shouldn't this be a paid course? I do these whiteboard sessions where I spend a lot of time trying to teach something, and I'm like, oh, I don't know. I don't know when it should be free or not. And I'm continuing down this path of just giving away as much as possible while trying to support and sustain 12 full-time people that are in the building, not anymore, of course, and 3 people offsite. So we're running a fairly large team to keep this beast going. So even though we're talking about millions of dollars, it's still not super profitable investing every single dollar and cent back into it. But I still believe that if you give more than you take, eventually it comes back. And so Robbie, you and I were talking about this yesterday a little bit, about how much a customer is worth to somebody, like a lifetime customer value, and how much they pay to acquire customers and how much they spend to market to them, truly market to them, bombarding them with ads and all kinds of funnel systems and funnel hacking and all that kind of stuff, right? The thing that's really amazing about our audience and our community, it's super powerful, it's super strong. The tribe that we built is so amazing. Marty Neumeier says the brand with the strongest tribe wins, and I'm all about building the strongest tribe. So in my mind, I'm not thinking about how much value we can extract from our customers. I'm always thinking, how much more value can we deliver? So to a point in which they have to say, enough, we get it. We'll just give you money so you can keep doing this, and people do. So I'm going to pull up some stats here to share with you in terms of like what we've been able to do. So people voluntarily, mostly unprompted, just donate. They just give us money because they want to become a sustaining member, much like public radio. This stuff happens, it's free to you, but it's not free to make. There's a whole big team and machine to make this stuff with me. And then beyond that, people will send me money on Venmo, random amounts from $5 to $500. I'm like, what is going on? And I have to tell you, during this time, during COVID, when our futures are uncertain, when people send me any dollar amount, whether it's $1 or $100, I'm not an emotional guy, but something happens, I don't know what happens, because I see this and I think, shouldn't you be holding on to this? Aren't you unsure about what's going on? And they just give it. It just like, it really touches me. It hits me really hard. So one of the very first checks that I got kind of randomly was from a kid who sent me like $17.64, something like that. And I looked at the check and I was like, oh my God, because we had started this joke that if you've benefited from our content, just send me, Uncle Chris, 10% of what it is that you make. That's all I'm asking for. That's what sales reps charge you for, and it's in the contract, but I'm just asking you to voluntarily give me money when you feel like it. So when I get this check, I bring it home and I hand it over to my wife and I say, honey, look at this. And she holds it up and she's like, my God, you can't take this poor kid's money. I said, yes, I'm going to take it. Not because I need the money, but because it would be an insult to this person. They stepped up, wrote me a check, and she goes, did you see the memo in there? I'm like, what memo? On checks, I know it's kind of old-fashioned way of paying people, but the check said in the memo, for a better life. And then like her eyes were just welling up with tears, and like, this is the impact that we make on people's lives, and they will return it to us in exponential ways. Let me show you some of the numbers here. So I'm going to pull up the numbers here. So in donations, this may or may not be totally accurate because it's just because Ben Burns has all the numbers here. But we probably bring in about $2,500 a month just purely on donations. With sustaining members, people send me Venmo, people will watch the channel, just super chat and just drop money. We make about $12,000 a month based on our 2 channels. This is from Google AdSense. So people who watch our videos, who see an ad pop up, there's a reason why they pop up, because that pays for somebody's salary. And if that's all you did, that wouldn't be a bad thing. We do affiliate marketing. That's when a company with aligned interests say, you know what, we love your audience. Here's a deal for you. We'll give you 40%. We'll give you 50% of every sale. We'll give you 15%. It doesn't matter. And we only work with companies that we like. We do speaking workshops, and brand deals. I do private coaching. So this is where people want to engage on the next level, where they don't want to just see a video made for 1,000 people. They just want to see a video just made for them, which is one-on-one coaching. And look at this one. This is the big one, the pro membership, which is an idea that Jose started that I just took and refined. The pro membership, there are over 330 people who pay us roughly $150 a month to be part of a coaching community, to have accountability, to be connected with other entrepreneurs. We share very openly in a private group. That generates about $50,000 a month. And just to process that a little bit, $50,000 a month, where technically I'm working 1 hour per week. That means I'm working 4 hours a month. This is better than Tim Ferriss's 4-hour work week because it's 4 hours a month, and I can do this from anywhere as long as I have a fast internet connection. This is the power of the community. This is where you get your money back. And there's no pressure system in terms of like trying to get people in this. I'm not holding anything back. And this is what they do. They jump in there to be part of that. And my very first course, I think, was a topography course, a course that I made. And I remember this. And again, my wife gets some credit for this because I put it out on the internet. I thought like, okay, now we have a following. Let's try and cash in on a little bit of this. I want to teach topography because they teach most of my young designers type. And I basically put it out there and not a lot of people tuned in for that. So I was like really disappointed. And she said, honey, here's the thing. You've been doing motion design for a really long time. That's what people know you for. To teach topography, they don't know you. So I had to go back to the drawing board. I had to make a lot of content. This is why we started doing typography reviews, poster design, poster critiques, and started to put it out there so that the conversation can shift away from one thing that they know you for the thing that you want them to know you for. So then finally we launched a class. And I think originally the class was sold for $79 per course, or for the course. It eventually went up to $299, but $79. And I think within the first couple of weeks, it made over $60 or close to $100,000. Isn't that remarkable for a $69 product? And to date, here are the stats. Here you can see the stats. Okay. So to date, the topography course, this number is low because it's only one kind of reporting, $464,000. From an initial $79 course. Basically something I was taught by Simon Johnson and other type instructors at Art Center, distilled through me, recreated for a platform on the web. That's how much it's generated. The Pro Group has generated more than this, but over $500,000. And my little logo design course, $213,000. Now in a marketplace where it's littered with logo design courses, why would anybody choose to buy our course versus somebody else, especially somebody with a much bigger name, known for logo design? And here's where we get to the heart of this. And I hope people are able to take this away and use for themselves. You need to realize something. We live in the creative economy. We live in the knowledge economy. And so there's no shortage of information out there. All you have to do is type on your keyboard on Google, and Google will spit out a beautiful answer for you. And you can learn almost everything that you want to learn for free or no money. There's a ton of free content out there. And why would people choose to spend money with one person or the other? It comes back to trust. I like you and I want to give back. It's in that spirit of reciprocity on them, not on me, that I've gotten so much value from you. I just feel like at this point, I don't even care if the thing is empty. And people do say this to us all the time. I don't care if I download it and it's 0 kilobytes. I just need to support you guys so that I can see this continue on. You've helped me in that way. And you can see if you stop chasing the quick transactional conversion, you actually build something that's meaningful, sustainable, and people give back in ways that you can't even imagine.
That arc from the sort of fundamentals of the way that you give work and tools and opportunities through the network, all the way to the way in which you're listening to that community, the way in which you're building that trust, that's something that is, I think, very, very unique. And I know that Jose has seen that kind of magic in that process and has actually pulled out of the partnership and to a certain degree and gone on to apply this practice in a whole range of contexts, corporations, communities, other organizations. So Jose, can you tell us a little bit about how that arc between generosity, confidence, commitment, and the trust that it generates, how that has played out in some of these other contexts that you've worked in the last couple of years?
Yeah, and some people have asked in the questions, what have I been doing? And, you know, when I left, so something that you might not know, and I haven't revealed this to anyone, probably shared it with anyone. And Chris kind of knows that because he was there and in the experience. And we have our friend Heather Scott to thank for a lot of that work that we did together. Was that I was pretty devastated when I left, the school, and when I left to do the next part of the journey. It really like knocked my confidence, in my ability to uh, kind of collaborate or co-create or create something with someone else. I was like, I felt that I was so good at it, but the fact that I couldn't make it work with Chris, basically, to me in my mind was failure. And it was hard to recover from that. It's taken me years to do it. But instead of going away and crying and taking my core money and being on vacation, I did the opposite. I actually went and dived in, because to be clear, I make a percentage of core sales, and that's the model that we learned from our teacher, Linda Weinman, who is the reason, by the way, we're all here, because Linda was really the inspiration for this. We have to give credit. But what I did is I went to try out, well, how do you make teams collaborate? So in New York at Consensus, is a blockchain incubator, one of my early students invited me, who was now the head of the incubator, to come over there and just do whatever you want to do. So I started working inside organizational development, and I discovered this book, which is amazing, Reinventing Organizations, which talks about all the principles of how to make the workplace and co-creation and collaboration in the world be inside these human aspects of being, like where people would show up to work authentically, where people would really just be in a very different environment. One of the biggest projects that I did at Consensus was, after I realized I can't train 1,000 people in this ecosystem without like really blunt force, what's the easiest way? I always look for the easiest way. So with one of my colleagues who I had trained, I said, let's build a Burning Man camp. And in building, taking 75, 80 people from the company to Burning Man, including the founders, and creating a camp, that the building it was the school, was the lesson, how to build with equanimity, how to build with all the different principles that the book Reinventing Organizations by Frederick Laloux and Ken Wilber, who's actually a spiritual teacher or a spiritual author. So the point is that building was really the school. And then the next project, or other projects, in addition to helping launch startups, all using the frameworks that we created. I'm validating the work that we've done, what we sell. Like, I'm a laboratory basically for the products. I've been really, and Chris will point out challenges or problems and create other kits, but then I have to actually try them out. And the solutions are really what really ends up being new products. So people ask, are there new core modules happening? So right now I'm working on a project with EO Products, and one of the challenges is translating the strategic frameworks all the way through to messaging, to campaigns, to photos, and all these things that I've done intuitively, or that I have the experience to do because I'm a creative, but other people, it's not natural, right? So I'm working with my former business partner at the group now, also working with her now. She's amazing, and she was a Consensus, and we're building frameworks for how to make all this reality happen inside companies, and the lens under which we do them is for our community, also just to make them simpler, to make them easier, and mainly to make them in a language that is more universal versus a lot of the business jargon and business terminology that is commonly used is not necessarily written for us as creatives. So the work and the journey of discovery, of exploration, to heal and to understand how you can co-create with someone, how you can create new realities, how you can create magic with other people, how can you have that dance, that totality of connection in the work that we do versus the old paradigm of linear, here's my idea, you go do it. But making the work and the leadership come from the bottom up, That's what I've been looking for if people are asking me. And that is hard as F, because the hardest thing to do is to transform individual mindsets. The hardest thing to do is to deprogram people from the years, decades, centuries of programming that we've been subjected to by society, education, governments, etc. And before you can really install new programming into the future, you have to break down the old paradigms. You have to break down the patriarchal thinking. You have to break down racism. You have to break down systematic inequality that has permeated how we function as people, as city states, as societies. Societies are built on inequality. It's the only way that people know how to do it. So yeah, my journey's been pretty damn trippy, but it was really to heal that question of how could we co-create together at a mass scale to redesign the world. That's what I've been doing to answer the questions.
I love this idea. And I think that there's so much to be explored in terms of how the thinking that you guys are doing for the creative community, how that actually applies to all sorts of other business contexts. And the fundamentals of your work are not changing. You're continuing to practice with a kind of a set of beliefs, a sort of set of foundational principles that really is proving to be valid in all of these different cases. And so I guess to kind of go back to the arc of today and our community online, how would you suggest that this type of thinking, this type of leadership, generosity, community building, how do people start that when maybe they feel they haven't been able to do it yet, or they feel that it's been a blind spot or something that they feel is an aspirational goal? What do they need to start to think about to apply some of this to their practice?
You asking me or Chris?
As you wish.
Jose, you want to take a stab?
You go first. I'm going to take your answers and
Okay, I'm happy to do that. So, Robbie, for clarification, are we talking about how organizations can adopt some of the philosophies or principles that we're talking about? How can individuals do this?
Well, how individuals can do it, and then how they might bring that to their own business or to a much bigger organization or team that they're working on. So how do they take the fundamentals of your practice, the things that are really creating this remarkable success and this remarkable impact, and how do they start from zero, so to speak? And I know that's obviously not a place that's, nobody's starting from zero, but for somebody that is feeling they are not doing this, how do they bring what is working for you uniquely into their practice?
Okay. There's a lot of ways to start, and I'm going to lay out a plan for some of you to start. When Jose was talking about the 4-hour work week, about going to your garage and looking for anything that you don't need or use anymore and selling that's it in a physical, tangible way. But there are things that you no longer use that are files, presets, color corrections, animation projects, documents, legal forms. There's things that you have, I think, little nuggets of gold laying in your hard drive somewhere. If you were to make the effort to go through there and start there, that would be the simplest thing. Think of it as eBay of your mind. I want to mine what's in my mind. I want to find something that somebody would think, that's going to save me a lot of time. And so they're going to exchange their money for their time, essentially. When I'd say to people, we sell you your time back to you, I really do mean that. The topography course retails for $300. You can go to Art Center. You can have Simon Johnson teach you. That'll be, I think, third term. And that's going to be a year and a half from now if you get into the school. So there's a lot of things you have to get over to get that. Or you can try to figure it out yourself. You could read 5 typography books and do a webinar somewhere, or you can just pay me $300 and do it. So I'm just selling you your time back to you. I'm selling you basically there's where you are and there's where you want to be. And in between that gap, if I can solve that problem, it's worth some amount of money to you. So Ben Burns, who authors a bunch of products and courses on our platform, he looks for the problem that every person struggles with, like how to write a proposal, how to write a case study, and he builds a product based on that. And they sell for like 50 or $60. And I think, when you're at the supermarket and you walk up to the cash register, there's all those impulse buy items, the tabloids, the bars of candy, and the mint, and the things that chapstick, whatever it is. It's just to get you right there at that moment. So the way we look at it is products that are under $99, under $79 are in that impulse buy. And people are like, hey, what have I got to lose? It's 60 or $70. It's not going to kill me if I spend that money. And all we need to do is make sure we deliver in excess of that, and then everybody's going to be happy. And people have told us this before. You can buy a $100 proposal template from us and go win a $10,000 gig. That's an incredible return on investment. That's how we look at it. So that's what I would suggest people do. And you already have tons of things. If you're a musician, there may be instruments that you have, loops that you can sell. If you're a photographer, maybe there are color presets that you can sell, different assets and brushes. I buy them all the time. I don't use them all, but I'm like, this is kind of cool. It's nice to have. And you can do that. If you're an animator, you can create project templates. You can create rigs for animation. You can create, again, color presets, or you can do what Andrew Kramer's done really well on Video Copilot, which is teach a bunch of people, and they just show up to support you in a lot of different ways.
So, and I think that that's very, very practical, and everybody has these little nuggets. But what about in the context where you're not necessarily trying to sell them for a financial outcome, but you're trying to offer them to the world to generate the types of conversations and community outcomes that really have come out of your work?
Yeah.
What are the, like, I'm imagining, at a college, that there's lots of ways that people within the college can teach each other that happens informally, that, my particular knowledge about writing emails or using LinkedIn isn't just, contained within a class or an individual session, but that can be something that you can offer in a much more dynamic, community-oriented way. So, Jose, how has that played out at Consensus and at EO and some of these other places that you've worked?
Repeat that again. How has what played out? Sorry.
So how has so basically what I'm trying to get you guys to share is not so much the specifics of packaging or pricing or selling an individual unit, but the way that your approach to the offering of your knowledge and the sharing of your work in a network that's trying to achieve a particular goal. How has that played out? How have you been able to bring some of this thinking that you guys represent into these contexts that it might not be naturally a fit?
That's important. And let's talk about that. Let's really break it down. And I'll break down the more ephemeral, the more like magical container. As designers, we actually have this ability to create a little bit of friction. And something that I learned from Chris that was really powerful, which annoyed the F out of me, but really, ultimately, it really sunk in. And now I really believe in it, is that you have to create a little bit of dynamic tension in the composition. Let's call it that. So the future, uses that acerbic blue, that is super like, I'm like, right? But that was actually a brand attribute or something that people would say about the differences in personality between Chris and I. The typography harkens really to kind of like a real bold, no pun intended, and modernist kind of, heritage, which Art Center obviously gives us. And Chris's personality of being, that stern Asian dad and of like, getting you to do the things that you need to do really kind of comes through really clearly. All of those things are not coincidental. Those are somebody with a lot of self-awareness and great mastery in storytelling that can actually really put that together. So if you're going to sell your stuff online, and if you're going to try to become a brand, let's say, or you need to be able to successfully translate your personality and your ideas and the movement. It has to be more than just, I'm selling stuff online. Great. Can you buy my stuff? It has to become a resonant idea. The colors mean something, the fact that it's a script typeface for the system and that it's missing the E, all those things mean something. There's a larger depth. And one thing to realize as designers and as creatives is that you get all caught up in the form and in how it looks relative to whether it's right or wrong. Technically, fine. We have the luxury, it's a huge luxury, just to be clear, to have an art center education. That's not something that everybody has, but you don't need that to really be able to learn how to translate, ideas into reality in a form that really resonates with people. You just have to become aware of what those attributes are for yourself and know how to translate them. And ultimately, the last thing I'll say about that is, like, you have to create a story that is compelling. And if you read, which Chris introduced me to, and it really helped me because it really has been an important part of all the aspects of the things that I've done. The book Story by Robert McGee, is that right, Chris? You'll understand, McKee with a K. You'll understand that every story has, a certain specific sets of points in it that, help the story both move along, but also make it compelling. The most important story in you creating a product or an idea is your story. You are the key. And if your story isn't about you, if the story isn't something that people can go, oh my God, I have the same story, I feel the same way, I'm the same person, I see you, then it's really just like stuff online, which is not going to get a lot of traction. So you got to be real. You got to get real. That's my advice for those people creating products and contents. Chris, you're smiling.
Yes, I have written it down in a bunch of little notes here, but I didn't know if Robbie wanted to say something.
I did it. Well, I realize we're running through our allotted 90 minutes. So as much as we could continue along this path, I think we should jump into some of the audience questions. And anybody in the audience that has additional questions that we can't get to today, we will try to address them after the end of the session, because I can see at least 20 thus far, and there may be more.
Yeah.
So I'm going to run through the list chronologically and see what we get to. So
okay.
Let's see.
Well, while you're reading and trying to find the best question, do you mind if I just jump in and add a little
Please.
bit to what? Okay. So to your original question about this idea, I don't think we're very good at recognizing our own talents. It's almost invisible to us that we forget what we know. We forget what we've learned. I was talking to this gentleman who's a guest on our podcast. I think his name is Matt Essam, if I remember correctly. He said, Chris, just imagine your favorite movie of all time. What's that movie? I'm like, the Blade Runner, Matrix, one of those two? And he's like, yeah, okay, how many times have you seen it? Dozens? Imagine if you had to see that 1,000 times. Would you want to kill somebody the next time they show you that movie? Well, probably. And so you forget what's in the movie because you just become numb to it. And that's like you. This is your story. This is your life. And you become numb to your own story. So you forget what it is that you have to share with the world. And all you have to do is try and share a little something with somebody, and you'll see how transformative that is to somebody. And Greg Gunn made this really simple tutorial, 10-slide carousel deck on how to pick colors. And he said, just pick one of your favorite colors and hit Command-I that inverts it or go 180 degrees from it. That gives you the complementary color. And then he's like, swing it here and here. And people are like, pfft. And I was surprised. I'm like, Greg, I didn't know you knew how to pick colors like that. That's an amazing little trick. He's like, yeah, I don't know. It has 25,000 likes just because of that one tip. And we just forget what it is that we know. So I encourage everybody, please, I don't beg often, but I'm going to beg you right now. Please just try it. Take something that you think, I don't know. Maybe somebody thinks this is good, maybe not. I don't know. And just be brave enough to put it out there and see what happens.
That's actually a perfect transition to this question. So this cut is coming from Laura and it's addressed to Chris. Do you think that this strategy of constantly giving away a generous amount of value also works for highly specialized niche creative consultants? In the world of architecture, lighting design particularly, I'm struggling with adapting these ideas to a more conservative or closed industry.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Essentially, it doesn't really matter how big or narrow your market is. You want to be seen as a thought leader, as an expert, as an authority. You can write a book, you can create podcasts, you can write white papers, you can do research and studies, you can create infographics. But basically, when somebody thinks of lighting architecture or some interior lighting, they want to associate your name with that word. So every time it's like you're top of mind. There's no way they're going to know that just by you working word of mouth. It's going to be very, very difficult. All the people that you can think of, all your celebrities, all your design heroes, all these celebrated authors and creators that you look up to, how do you know them? It's not because they're privately making stuff, not sharing with anybody in some small town somewhere. It's because they are putting content out there. They're sharing very generously. And we get to know people like that. My friend Joel Pilger says, here's what happens when you own a space and you start to create content that puts you in that position is you go from to the. Instead of going from being a lighting designer, you become the lighting designer. And that's really important. And you associate yourself with that. It's hilarious. People will often make polls online, like who's the best designer? And they'll say two names. And sometimes they throw my name in there. They'll say something like Stefan Sagmeister, if they're really knowledgeable about design. But most often they say Aaron Draplin. And then they'll throw my name. It's like, what kind of work have I done to warrant being even on this list? Taking nothing away from the other two. It's like, why am I even on this list? I'm on this list because you've seen me make a lot of noise to give value to people. And that's the only reason why. Names like Paul Lecher, Michael Beirut, Brian Collins, Sagi Haviv, those names should be on that list, but they're not creating content in a prolific way that connects with this kind of young audience. And I am. And I'm not even a young guy. So you can do it.
Dude, you're from an alien race, man. You look like 25. And like, I'm older than Chris.
No, you're not. You're not older than me.
I'm younger than Chris, and I look way older. Somebody in the chat said I look old. I'm like, thanks.
It's the beard.
It's the beard.
It's the beard. If you shaved it, you'd be like 5 years younger.
Yeah, and the hair's still black at the top.
Yeah.
So, Jose, do you want to add anything, or I think that covered the question.
That covers it. I think I want to say, that there is a new generation of designer being born on this call today, on the chat. And it's, everyone here who's on this call, all of the followers of the future are the future, no pun intended, to make it like, inside, because the next level, the next frontier, the next generation isn't going to be educated institutionally, isn't going to be powered by the validation that, catalogs and monograms and AIGA or any of the institutions give. They're going to be validated by how much content they put out and how well known they are. So I hear people in my generation kind of say like, well, you can't just be an Instagram star and be an authority. And I'm like, yeah, watch them do it, because it's not about, it's democratization of access to the platforms. The internet changed the whole game. And, and it's not like the older generation is going to adapt. They're not. It's simply the new will rise. And the only reason that I am, or not the main reason why I'm so excited about, being able to influence an entire generation of creative people is because together we can really make some impactful change. In the past, we've been relegated to being the butt of the process, meaning you're in a department, the business stakeholders kind of give you the orders of what to do. But by becoming entrepreneurial, by really following Chris and really learning how to get your S together and make your business, now you have the same power that the business stakeholders had. And the entrepreneurial education to build your own practice is the same education to build any other business. I mean, my experience in building what I built with Chris's experience in building the future comes from the fact that we were 20 years running businesses, running agencies, that we knew what a P&L was, that we understood hiring people, and we knew all these things. We only have that because we were rebels and we chose not to go work at an agency, because I wouldn't hire Chris to work at an agency and he wouldn't want to work at an agency. I don't want to work at an agency. So we took the path less traveled, and now in knowing that the future is completely, decoupled from the past or from the existing system, building this community, building this movement, and allowing every single individual here to be empowered to create their own business will hopefully also teach them that those same skills will help you build the next business of how to do sustainable, end-to-end products, how to build, food ecosystems that are, ecologically sustainable, how to build ideas and businesses with good vibes, not with rapey vibes, the 20th century. So that's really ultimately one of the things that if people understood that the reason why this is not a simple thing, the work you're doing, Robbie, in entrepreneurial training, the work Bold is doing is actually extremely important. And it's critical for us as a human species to survive the work that you're doing. Not to overhype it, but it is. Chris is like,
no, it would not be like you to overhype, Jose. Not at all.
Yeah. But
Yes.
But it is important, and I am very grateful to you, Robbie, and I am extremely grateful to Chris and to his leadership as a creative leader, and to his willingness to be brave in doing what he does. It takes a lot to take this risk, and there's a lot of people here who are alum who might be listening, who are wondering what to do, how to pivot their careers now that they're either older or of COVID or because of whatever reason. And all I can say to you is you really have to be brave. You really have to be bold. And I hate to use bold, but you really have to let go and get out of your way and understand that you are worthy to share who you are for people. Does that make sense? You have to be worthy.
So this leads to a great question, which is I'm going to combine two questions together here. And it allows me to also just speak a little bit about Art Center. So the first question is, where are there emerging holes in the online education space? You guys are doing providing a great portfolio of courses and products. LinkedIn Learning is thriving these days. There's all of the other channels. There's the Coursera, Udemy. There's this entire ecosystem. So firstly, what are those holes? And then secondly, is this a confrontation for the existing educational higher ed environment? And so, I'm going to start with the answer, and then I'll leave it to you guys. So firstly, we are going through a fundamental change in the way that people live and work, right? And that's been happening for, 30 years, probably longer. It's been building slowly by slowly. And now we've reached a point where, with the pandemic and with the power of technology, we've totally transformed. And of course, those changes are confrontational. But a college like Art Center and others out in the higher education world don't see this as a sort of end of the road fear scenario. We see it as an opportunity to rethink the way that we deliver education. And so much of what Jose and Chris have learned and applied comes from this core of their experience at Art Center. And that experience is human. That experience is focused on critical thinking, and it is focused on community, right? Those very core tenets that have allowed them to thrive, that have created the context for their education, those still exist in a world of online and remote connection. They have a different format and flavor, and there's lots of details that need to be figured out. But ultimately, what we're doing here in this group, the three of us with this incredible audience, is something that Art Center does in lots of different contexts. And we do it for our students, we do it for our alumni, we do it for our faculty. And we're really working through the challenges of adapting to the technology environment, but we're never going to lose the need for a unique and small ratio of students to teachers. We're never going to lose the need for the need for critique and group conversation and an environment where everybody can contribute, right? A lot of that stuff doesn't exist in traditional online education. Maybe with the future, there's an element of that, but the dynamics of having peers and having a community of fellow learners is something that creates a professional network that takes you all the way through your career. And so there's lots of places you can find these networks, and Art Center is one, and we offer tremendous value from that point of view. And I wouldn't say so otherwise. And equally, here we are having this conversation with two disruptors, two people that have really pushed us to think about our mechanisms and our pricing and all of that background that exists behind our education system. So that was a little bit longer than I intended to speak about that, but it's I'm so important to share that message. To sort of go back to you guys, what are some of those emerging holes in the space? Where do you see opportunities for new content and new delivery mechanisms?
You mind if I jump in, Jose? All right. Here's the thing about looking forward. You're not going to get there by looking at the rearview mirror. You're not. That's the past. And if you look at the ratio between the windshield and the rearview mirror, it's small for a reason. You have to go forward. You have to divorce yourself from history, to divorce yourself and separate your attachment to process and focus more on the outcome. So if we want to teach the world, we have to sit there and say, we need a whole nother model. And how we get there is open for discussion. So there are changes that are, excuse me, there are changes that are happening on a seismic level right now, that we're entering into a possible second wave of the virus spreading infections. And so we have to really start to think here, and we have to move really fast. So dogma, tradition, these things slow us down. And I think we're ready for it. We're ready for it. So I want to share something with you guys. I have a little presentation here. So where do you start? You need to find an audience that is being ignored right now. And it doesn't take that much to find a group of people who share a worldview on things. And they're saying, hey, does anybody care about us? Right now, it happens to be systemic racism, Black lives, trans lives, and that's who's being ignored. So we need to give those people some attention, this group. And so what you want to do is you want to dig in. You want to find the gaps. Find the gaps to fill, because they're there and they exist. And if you move quickly, you can build a whole different business model for yourself. And all we want to do is help people to get where they want to go. We got to design to move from an existing situation to preferred one. And if you guys know anything about branding, if you love branding, there's something I borrowed from UX, which is to know me, to anticipate my needs, make my life simple, look out for me and reward me. This is what you need to do. And how do you do this? You do this through teaching. And you guys know this expression, teach what you know. And knowing is scary for a lot of people. It sends them into an existential crisis. Like, what does anyone know anyways, right? So I modify that and say, why don't you just share while you learn? So instead of becoming an information hoarder, share your discoveries. Share anything that you have and put it out there and see what happens. This is from the book Rework, to out-teach the competition, because they're busy hoarding all their secrets. And you could do that, and you could be obsessed, and you have all the tools, but it's kind of lonely to play with all the tools. And Jim Rohn said something like this: wealth is your ability to convert and transform knowledge and experience. So if you want to make money, convert your learnings to your earnings. Become a documentarian of your work. And we know this. The group of creative people who have gathered here today are very divergent thinkers. We're able to see and connect things that normal, non-creative people can't see. So what we do is when we connect those things, we synthesize them together, because there's nothing new under the sun. And here's the secret. Here's where you're going to make the money. you're going to transform this. Okay? So a lot of people really get addicted to this thing of learning. And learning to me is not about consumption, because that's an intellectual exercise. So we consume books, videos, courses, podcasts, audiobooks, webinars, like the one that you're on today, and it gives you a good feeling. You feel really happy, like you're making progress. But this is the illusion of mastery. Like you're actually doing something, but you know this. You got to go and do something with the information you learned. You got to go and make that product. You got to scrape what it is that you've done. You've got to start sharing and posting and letting go of your fear. So there's this little rule that I have. It's a 2x rule. For every one piece of content you consume, go out and make 2 things. It should be twice as much at the minimum. So when you learn something, reflect on what you've learned. Ask yourself, what was most valuable to me? Or how could I adapt this piece of content for a different audience that's underserved and ignored right now? And then implement it. So consume, reflect, implement, and share. And it builds this wonderful virtuous cycle of confidence. So everybody here, I wish you could have more confidence. So it begins something like this. The more you try, the more you're exposed to. That totally makes sense. The more you try, the more you're exposed to. And the more you're exposed to, guess what? The less you have to be afraid of. And the less you're afraid of, the more you're likely to try. So by going around and around this circle or this triangle, you're going to grow in your confidence. So just share. Share everything. Share everything that you've learned. Jose, back to you.
That's a really, really well succinctly put, way of doing it. And I actually admire watching the people that Chris has trained on how to do that and providing the templates and the model, because I see them, I follow them on Instagram and on social media. And it's really powerful. I also love it when people create like video content and podcasts and they reference or invite us to it. And then, I've, joined a lot of those that people have asked. I think something just to add on the more ephemeral side is that, people think that there's audience building from a quantitative standpoint, but realize that, your niche and who you are and the hashtag that is you is powerful in itself, and that you don't need 100,000 or a million followers. You just need the few people that can validate, what you're doing to get to where you need to go. Like one example is, how can I charge more for my services as a designer or as a creative? Part of it is, are you respected? Are you well known? Are you putting valuable content out there? Most of the people that are putting content out there using the tools and the templates and the process that Chris has shared are sharing other people's content. In that slide, I borrowed this from user experience, or I am sharing my journey. People think that they have to make something original, and there's nothing original. If you understand Core's 3 exercises are actually from other people that I've gathered, and I give credit. I found this one at Razorfish. This one's from user experience. This one is from my MBA partner, and it's called the Carver method, and I adapted it and I made it modified. So really, it's not ultimately, what it is. It's the remix that is unique to your story. That's why I said at the beginning, you are the key and your story is important. If I'm channeling, my spiritual vibes and like calling core magic and like using all these things to create the container for core, it's because that's me. It's not because I'm thinking, oh, let me do something that's interesting from a marketing standpoint. I am genuinely sharing with you who I am. I'm telling you the truth. So that's really the real hard thing to do. When Chris shares his content, his style, who he is genuinely Chris. That's actually Chris. That is his manifestation of his essence in what he does. So people asking the question, like, where do I start? I'm no one. You start by sharing your journey, and you say, I'm not a master. I'm going to share what I've been taught. That's more than enough to get that thing started. But remember that it's a conversation. It's not you proving that you're right or you proving that you're an expert. That is a 20th century colonial institutional mentality that is no longer relevant. All you want to give the people around you is the same value that you've received. Give and you shall receive. And that's really what's going to make you powerful. If you can get the people around you, that one person who will listen to you, I'll listen to you. That one person who will validate you. If you can give them a gift and they're like, thank you. and then you say, well, let me give more. What happens on social media is that 10 people, 100 people received it, and they're like, well, thank you. And it expands and it amplifies energetically. Social media is about understanding how to control energy and how to control the flow of connection. It's not about content or empirical truth. It's look at what's happening in the world of politics. If you can veer the conversation emotionally, for Christ's sake, our president runs the world on Twitter. So like that gives you the key to the power of how you can use social media and how powerful it is. And don't do what he's doing, because that's not great. But think about it. If you're hesitant to get online, don't be hesitant. Just do it.
Well, and to add to that, and this is another question that we've received, is say you're implementing this theory of sharing and producing content and offering, a very honest appraisal of your journey as you do it, and you think you're on the right track, and you spend a couple of months or a couple of years, and you realize that much of what you were promoting and offering to the world, you now don't agree with so much. You've sort of had a slight change of context or personal philosophy, or something has shifted that. Is it okay to do that publicly? Is it okay for your audience to see that weakness? And how can our attendees feel confident in being so public with their journey?
I think, I hope I do this right, but I was watching the Beastie Boys documentary, and they're accusing them of being hypocrites. And he said, I'd rather be a hypocrite than have the same idea forever. And so to be able to say you're wrong, you've changed your mind, you've grown, you've expanded, I think in our culture, our society, there's something wrong with that. And why? This need to be consistent is the thing that fuels us, that drives us forward. Most of us have the same religion that we grew up in. Most of us live within relative close proximity to where we grew up. It's like, let it go. Be an adventure. Be an explorer. It's a big world. It's a big world of ideas. Play with it. Dance with the fear. And be okay and be vulnerable to say, you know what? I grew and I changed. Jose did something today. He said, after we split up, it hurt him. And it was a blow to his confidence. And it was tough on both of us. Really, it was an emotionally draining experience. But I'm glad that we went through what we did, because I learned so much from my friend and mentor that for a long time, he was the mentor, even though he's younger. I'm the student. And he taught me so many things. He taught me how to think about business strategy. He brought me into the room with a C-suite executive, which I've never been before. He elevated me to that plane. He helped me to find my voice. He pushed me to create content on YouTube, which is one of those things that if people ask me, what would you have done earlier? That's definitely one of them. So without that generosity, creating space for me to do that, I wouldn't be who I am today. And so I've said it to him privately. I'm saying it publicly. And I want to share a little very personal private story with you guys. Jose and I were speaking at an event in Portland. It was really mostly to, I think I would call it his audience, the web product people. And I was really out of my element. And we prepared like all night the night before. And now it's going to be our turn to speak. And we're like coming up in like 30 minutes. We're in the stairwell adjacent to the main speaking room. I'm pacing around like a nervous animal, like a chihuahua. It's like, I got to get out of here. And Jose's like, dude, will you calm down? You're starting to freak me out here. I'm like, look at that. Look out there. I don't know what to do. This is very early on in my public speaking career. And he said something to me. He said, Chris, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go and peek through that door and look at the audience and tell me what you see. I came back and it's like, I don't know. There's a lot of people out there. He goes, no. He goes, you know what's cool? They're all white people. We're in Portland. Look at you and me. You're an Asian guy. I'm a Puerto Rican guy. By virtue of us just existing as who we are, we're going to be different and unique. So just chill the F out. Let's go out there and do it. And that was the moment that I needed that. And I've taken that moment with me forever. And I do tell this story, just not here together. So for many of the reasons, I have a lot to be grateful for Mr. Jose. And I'm so glad that we continue to be able to make money together, to prosper, but in slightly different ways that doesn't create the kind of friction that happens when two people have both their hands on the steering wheel. It could be a battle there, and it's good. It's like, if I can drive, I'm going to be a good steward of what's going on.
And Chris is a Capricorn and I'm a Taurus. So that's like, Capricorn is always on top. So that's key to understand and to acknowledge that, like, meaning like he's the boss. So I really want to echo that. And like, as we're closing today's session, let and allow for the collaborative spirit and the co-creative spirit and the fear that people have of co-creating with their friends and with other creatives because of ego and because of all these other things. For me, like the commiserate of that story in your developmental cycle, I didn't grow up with a strong father or with a masculine figure who was the guide for me as a young man, as a boy. And I always just did my own thing. And like, I was call it wily, the wild man. And that was my thing. But with Chris and learning the discipline and the rigor and the damn workouts at 3:00 every day. And I still eat tender greens, the same thing every day. And I still keep the lean, girlish figure I have because of my experience of the discipline that I learned from Chris. It was discipline that I needed. It was exactly that point in my life that I needed to have a friend or a mentor who would complete that part of my training. So if you think of all collaborations as master to master, we're all each other's masters. We're all each other's teachers. In the lessons that you learn from either a friend, a collaborator, a business colleague, a lover, it doesn't matter. You are completing the development of who you are. And the right person will emerge at the right time. Chris needed to get that push. I needed to get that discipline. The lessons that we learn from our experiences together are what allow us to continue to weave, our stories. And you have to do it with equanimity. You have to do it with love. We did a very mindful and a very conscious uncoupling. We still remain in business, through the financial constructs. We still motivate each other. I mean, I released Core 2.0 and I didn't even have to talk to Chris. I could hear Chris going, it's like, you got to get this thing out. And, talking to Ben, it still drives me to this day. And that's something that you can't replicate unless you go out there and try it. Go build something with someone, go build something with a friend, go build something with your spouse, whoever it is, build something. And in that process, the school is really your journey. The school is always your journey, but you have to be brave. You have to be willing to step into your purpose and to step beyond survival, to step beyond, can I make money at this? Are people going to like me? You can't care about any of those things. You have to be truthful in your intention to create the next version of whatever it is that you're doing without fear. The minute there's fear vibrationally in your frequency, it doesn't allow you to do it. So whatever you can do, whether it's yoga, meditation, visualizations, whatever it is that you need to do to maintain a higher frequency, you need to learn how to do that and step into your purpose.
There's a lot of love in the chat right now.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of heart emojis.
I don't even know how you do emojis in Zoom. That's pretty awesome.
I'll make a carousel and teach you how to do it on Instagram. Okay. Yeah.
And,
See?
Okay.
Content,
Thank
right?
you.
There's a
That'd
gap.
be awesome.
There's a
I
gap.
Make
I'll
emojis,
show you how to
Chris.
do it.
Can
you
teach me? I don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
So thank you, Chris and Jose. From my point of view, this is just the beginning. It's the beginning for us here in this Zoom room. It's the beginning for everybody that's listening in from all over the world. It's a incredible opportunity to think about how these ideas come into practice and to take that risk. And it's not always easy, but if it was easy, it wouldn't be meaningful and you wouldn't have a story. So I suppose in conclusion to everything, we are obviously still here. So you can find us on LinkedIn. You can find obviously Chris and Jose through the future and through Core and through the system. You can find me at Art Center. And I want to acknowledge that we haven't addressed all of the questions that you've asked. It's been an overwhelming number and a lot of specifics. So please reach out to us if you feel like you didn't get your question answered correctly or with enough attention, and we will make sure to address that. And these questions are part of our conversation, are part of our story, are part of the future of all of this work together. So I leave you with that and sincere appreciation for your time and presence and for who you both are and who this community is and the great fortune we have of being able to work together to make the world a better place. So thank you.
Thank you, Robbie. Thank you for putting this together and bringing Jose and I back together, giving us the space to share our story and continue the narrative of what was, what is, and what will be. If you don't mind, I'm gonna just do like a little Marvel-esque kind of end cutscene. Is that okay? But Jose, please say what you want to say before I just get us out of here.
I was just gonna say namaskar. The crazy in me sees the crazy in you, mother effers.
That's classic. Very good. Okay, so here's the last little bit for you guys. Here's the shortcut. Okay, of everything we talked about, I just put a couple of slides together for you guys. This was bold, and we're talking about building community, aka how to get rich slowly by being consistent, persistent, and obsessed with delivering value to others. Let that sink in for a second. This is the antithesis to our culture of 6-minute abs, instant coffee, fast fashion, no money down, no skill required, miracle cure life hacks. Get away from that and learn to love teaching.